Let me see, review, not reversal. I think Channels asked that question, and I was consistent in my statements. Yesterday, when I delivered my remarks, I said the President has approved the following for implementation over the next 4 weeks, spanning from 2nd to 29th June 2020, subject to review. And even today, I was very clear that it is also important to stress that the PTF shall continue to monitor the progress and keep the option of review open should the need arise. I was very careful about the selection of the word I intended for several reasons. If you say reversal, you're taking us back. Review can mean acceleration, like what Dr. Sani explained with regards to the domestic flights vis-a-vis the closure of the borders. That will be a subject of review if the need arises. So I am not in a position to give you all the reasons that might arise that will call for a review. But we will continue to monitor and see the levels of compliance, the levels of adherence, because we have put so much of guidelines out there, and the states would also contribute through the protocols that they will sign off with regard to business places, with regard to places of worship. And I think it's very, very important that at this point we realize that the responsibility for enforcement has always been with the states. We provide policy directions and guidelines, but when it comes to enforcement, we rely heavily on the state apparatus working hand in hand with the security agents to ensure compliance. That takes me to the question that was asked by AIT regarding enforcement, that if we had challenges with enforcement in the past, would it be expedient now to cede off the enforcement with regards to places of worship to the governors? I believe the governors have the responsibility to superintend over their territories. And most of the issues we want to see enforcement applied to are things that fall within the confines of their responsibilities and jurisdiction to ensure enforcement in those areas. And I can assure you that I have seen some of the governors in action, and I am quite satisfied with the level of enforcement that they have demonstrated. They might not all be in the same category. Some have been quite decisive in taking actions in dealing with this pandemic. Some, probably because of the numbers they have not been that decisive in the open, as you would see with certain governors that are working very hard to ensure that they limit as much as possible the rate of transmission into their territories. And now that the virus has seeded itself, it doesn't respect boundaries. It has seeded itself to different parts of this country. Every governor will have to take ownership of this level of driving home everything that has to do with our response to this pandemic. They have the facilities, they have the manpower. Like Dr. Chikwe rightly explained, contact tracing is not the responsibility of the Nigerian Center for Disease Control. It is the responsibility of the apparatus of government in the various states to contact trace and supply them with the information. And they will now follow up with calls to establish the status of the people. How are you feeling? We understand you are in this location. And have you started developing some symptoms? What is the general well-being of an individual? So it is very, very important that we realize this, because we've never assumed the responsibility. And that is why they have EOCs, Emergency Operation Centers, in the states. And those EOCs are manned by employees of the state. In each and every of the 36 states plus the Federal Capital Territory, they have their own task force that are charged with the responsibility of driving home the guidelines that they receive from the national. And we have always said it, that the states too, because it's a health matter in which they have responsibilities because it is on the concurrent legislative list. Even the local governments have responsibilities because primary health centers fall within the jurisdictions of local governments. So I believe that this is the time for every governor to own up, to stand for their people and make sure that they drive home the implementations of these guidelines and ensure compliance. Dr. Sani was right when he spoke about the fact that at this stage and at this level, you cannot be very correct with either percentages or numbers when it comes to places of worship. Because the governors will be looking at the information that we have made available to them. If I were a governor and I have 10 local governments that constitute a substantial percentage of this infection, what do you think will be running or going on in my mind as to whether I would allow for openings of mass gatherings? So we've made that information available to you and to the states. And we expect that every governor will look at what percentage of these infections do I contribute to the national figure, and what kind of policies and guidance can I give my people so that collectively we can either abate or reduce the level of community transmission. If I have 2,000, 3,000 clustered in one place, obviously as a governor sitting, I will look at it and say, is it safe to have any form of activity in this area? And in consultation with the people in that area, obviously you will come to the only one logical conclusion, that it is not safe to have any form of clustering of people or gathering or congregating of people in that area. So we do not want to take away that responsibility from them, because we cannot pretend it from the national. They are the only ones that can take charge and deal with it at that level. The Minister of State Education has asked me, Amaka, to tell you that there are free education websites, and he gave me two: schoolgate.ng and classroom.com.ng. Those are free websites. And also to tell you that all major networks have already given substantial discount on their data for educational purposes. So I think you advise whoever is asking that question, parents, educate them on the fact that they can avail themselves of this free education website that I have called out, and also take the benefit of the discounts that have been granted by the major networks that we have. Yeah, but what he's saying is that there's already discount on data given by the major networks. They have also established free education website. You know, it depends on the kind of data you want. It's true, we all use phones. It depends on the kind of data you want. If you want the data that will just provide the basic services for you, you will get it at the cost of that particular kind of data. If you all want all the channels on DSTV, you are not going to pay the same with somebody like me that is only interested in news channels. All other channels, as far as I'm concerned, you can close them up, except for channels that give me educational materials, historical materials. But any other channel is of no consequences to me. I will stay with my news channel to be current, to know what is happening. That presupposes that I'm going to pay less than somebody that wants a bouquet that covers all the channels. So it depends on the kind of data you want. You should be ready to pay exactly for that kind of channel. In closing, I had shared my experience here with you about how when I get back home I'm a suspect, and truly these last 2 months have been very grilling experiences for each and every one of us. You and us on this side of the aisle. We've gone through some very difficult times. What we used to consider normal, we can't practice it again. I can tell you for free that in the last 2 months, my routine has been my house, the office, the conference, the villa, the venue of our meeting. I have not visited anybody's home in the last 2 months. I have not received visitors into my home. People who have strayed, I have politely asked them to go. Why? It's a question of self-preservation. I must do everything humanly possible to ensure God helping me to preserve myself. For the benefit of self first, my family, my loved ones, my friends, and those of you that come in contact with me on a daily basis. I'm saying this so that we can really know the level of responsibility we need to take. If for 2 months I have not stepped out of my home to go on any social visit, it means a lot to me to keep touch with friends, relatives. But because of the circumstances of the time and what we are dealing with, I believe that the message that should go out there is not about if the federal government has lifted the ban. We didn't lift, we relaxed it. And like Dr. Sani said, you are not obligated to go to a place of worship. But for those that feel that their spirituality would only be uplifted by being in a place of worship, we have given you conditions for self-preservation if you want to go. And we've made it very, very clear that the places of worship have been established as one center where transmission has gone on. The stories abound of countries that opened up places of worship and went back to lock them back. Because with one visit, and that's why we are taking all the steps we are taking to ensure that is it safe enough? It is now left for the places of worship, the administrators of the places of worship, with the local authorities to come to a decision as to whether those facilities are safe enough to receive their congregations. And it is very, very important that we know that the more we congregate, the more exposed we are, and the likelihood of getting infected. My prayer is that each and every one of us, individually and collectively, would take a decision for self-preservation first, and for the good of your families, and for the good of the community. Thank you and good evening.